What if the same being that stole the sun, moon, and stars to bring light into a world of darkness was also a greedy, bumbling fool who was constantly trying to scam people of a free meal? That's the paradox at the heart of one of the most important figures in Native American mythology, and it's a figure who exists in multiple different types of mythology. What's going on, everyone? My name is Jason Hamilton, and on this channel, Myth HQ, we break down the most epic stories and characters from mythologies all across the world. Today, we're talking about ravens and crows, the ultimate trickster creators whose intelligence and appetites literally shape the cosmos. Now, in the time before time, the world was trapped in a blanket of absolute darkness. The people of the Pacific Northwest, like the Haida and the Tlingit, tell of an old chief who hoarded all of the light in the universe. He kept the sun, the moon, and all the stars locked away in a set of nested cedar boxes just for himself. But Raven, who existed in this darkness, heard about the hidden light. And Raven, let's be clear, is driven by two things: an insatiable curiosity and an even more insatiable appetite. He decided he wanted that light, so he devised a plan. He transformed himself into a single hemlock needle and floated down into the drinking water of the chief's daughter. She drank the needle without noticing and soon after gave birth to a baby boy. That baby, of course, was Raven in disguise. As the chief's grandson, Raven was a difficult child. He cried and cried, refusing to be comforted by anything. The only thing he pointed at, the only thing he seemed to want, were the shimmering cedar boxes in the corner of the lodge. The chief, doting on his only grandson, eventually gave in. Alright, you can play with one. And he gave the Raven the box containing the stars. As soon as he had it, Raven tipped the box over and the stars flew up through the smoke hole and scattered across the dark sky. Annoyed, but still a loving grandfather, the chief later let him play with the next box, the one holding the moon. Raven immediately tossed it up through the smoke hole and the pale light filled the world. Finally, Raven cried for the last, most brilliant box, the one that held the sun. The moment the chief handed it over, Raven transformed back into his bird form, grabbed the sun in its beak, and shot out of the lodge, taking the light with him. As he flew, the smoke from the fire stained his feathers, turning him from his original white to a deep glossy black that we see today. And in that one act of cosmic theft, driven by a selfish desire for a shiny object, Raven became the world's greatest benefactor. But this is the catch with Raven. His heroism is almost always an accident. He's a creator, a hero, a total buffoon, and a con artist all rolled into one. One day he's tricking the first humans out of a clamshell, the next he's trying to trick a fish into jumping into its mouth. His story is a perfect example of how a single character can be both the revered architect of the world and its most ridiculous inhabitant. But the story of a bird creating or transforming the world isn't just found in North America. Across the ocean, another culture saw ravens not as tricksters, but as the literal mind of a god. In the 9 realms of Norse mythology, no god was more obsessed with his knowledge than Odin the Allfather, and perched on his shoulders were his 2 most trusted agents, a pair of ravens named Hugin, which meant thought, and Munin, which meant memory. These were more than pets or messengers. They were literal extensions of Odin's own consciousness. Every single morning at dawn, Odin sent Hugin and Munin out into the world. They would fly across the 9 realms, from the mortal lands of Midgard to the fiery depths of Muspelheim. They saw everything, heard everything, and missed nothing. By the time Odin sat down for breakfast, they had returned, perching on his shoulders to whisper all the secrets and news of the cosmos directly into his ears. It was through them that Odin knew what his enemies were plotting, what mortals were praying for, and what fate had in store. Odin's reliance on his ravens was so total that he was often called Hrafnguth, the raven god. He even expressed a deep personal anxiety about them. In one poem he says, "I fear for Hugin that he may not return, but I fear more for Munin." He was worried he might lose his thought, his ability to process the present, but he was terrified of losing his memory, the foundation of all his wisdom. Without them, he wouldn't just be blind to the world, he would be incomplete, a god stripped of his very mind. This divine connection made its way into the mortal world. We have Viking warriors who revered Odin, and they would march into battle under a raven banner. Sagas claim these flags were magical, and before a victory, the raven embroidered on the banner would appear to flap its wings as if alive, hungry for the coming slaughter. For a Viking warrior, seeing a raven circle a battlefield wasn't a bad omen. It was a sign that Odin himself was present, watching over them and choosing the worthy to join him in Valhalla. From the mind of a god to the front lines of battle, the raven was a symbol of wisdom and terrifying fate. Yet in another corner of Europe, the bird took on an even more explicit female and sovereign form. In Celtic Ireland, the line between war, death, and magic was blurry, and right in the middle of it was the Morrigan, or the Phantom Queen. She was a goddess of war, but she was also the embodiment of fate on the battlefield, and her favorite form was that of a crow. When the Morrigan appeared, you paid attention. She could be seen before a battle, washing the bloodstained armor of the warriors who were fated to die. Her presence wasn't about good and evil per se, but it was about destiny. She didn't necessarily cause death, but she presided over it, and her appearance as a crow circling overhead meant the scales of fate had been tipped. Sometimes she was one goddess, other times a trio of sisters, including Bive, whose name literally just means crow, and seeing three crows together was a sign that the Phantom Queen herself was watching. Her most famous story involves the legendary Irish hero Cuchulainn. The Morrigan appears to him as a beautiful woman and offers him her love and her aid in battle. Cuchulainn, in a stunningly poor display of judgment, rejected and insulted her. Big mistake. The Morrigan swore she would hinder him at his most desperate moments, and true to her word, she attacked him in the forms of an eel, a wolf, and a heifer while he was locked in combat. Though he wounded her each time, her interference ultimately sealed his fate. When Cuchulainn was finally dying, tied to a stone post so he could die on his feet, no enemy dared approach him. They only knew for sure that the great hero was dead when the Morrigan, in the form of a crow, landed on his shoulder. It was the ultimate signal that his life was over and his soul was now hers to claim. This connection to sovereignty runs so deep that it survives in a way to this day. A related legend is that of Bran the Blessed, a Welsh king whose name means raven. After being mortally wounded, he commanded his followers to bury his head under the White Hill in London, where the Tower of London now stands, to protect Britain from invasion. This myth echoes in the famous tradition of the ravens of the Tower of London, the belief that if the 6 resident ravens ever leave, the crown and the kingdom will fall. By the way, I try to keep these histories as uninterrupted as possible. I don't run mid-roll ads or take on sponsors that don't fit. My one source of funding for this channel is a project I think you'll actually enjoy, and it's my fantasy all-access library. It's a huge shared universe of mythology-inspired fantasy books written by me and my team, where all the world's mythologies exist together. A new novel comes out every month, and if that sounds cool and you want to support the channel, the link is down below. No pressure though. So why are these birds everywhere in mythology? Well, ravens and crows are on every continent except Antarctica, and their intelligence is pretty staggering. Modern science is basically just confirming what our ancestors observed for thousands of years. These birds are masters of problem solving. They can use tools, even manufacturing them by bending twigs into hooks to get grubs out of a log, and they can plan for the future, hiding food not just for later, but in specific locations based on who might be watching. Researchers have proven they can recognize individual human faces and will hold a grudge for years against someone who has wronged them, even teaching their crow friends to be wary of that person too. So it's not just instinct, there's actual culture here. And their brains are incredible. A study at the University of Tübingen, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, found that the crow's brain has a structure called the nidophilium caudolateral. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correct, probably not, which functions very much like our own prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for complex thought and decision making. The shocking part is that our evolutionary paths diverged over 300 million years ago, and it's a stunning case of convergent evolution where 2 completely different blueprints resulted in the same high-level intelligence, or at least similar. So when ancient people saw a raven solve a problem or heard a crow mimic human speech, it wasn't a huge leap to think that these creatures were magical. Their black feathers associated them with the night, secrets, and the void, and their habit of gathering at sites of death like battlefields made them natural psychopomps, or soul guides, traveling between the world of the living and the dead. This mixture of intelligence, appearance, and behavior made them perfect candidates for a mythological stardom. And this wasn't limited to just a few cultures. In ancient Greece, the raven was originally Apollo's sacred bird, and it was pure white. The story goes that Apollo tasked a raven with watching over his pregnant lover, Coronis. When the raven returned with news that she'd been unfaithful, Apollo, in a fit of rage, cursed the messenger for bringing bad news, scorching its feathers black for all time. Meanwhile, in East Asia, the symbolism is often overwhelmingly positive. In China, Japan, and Korea, you'll find the legend of a 3-legged crow. This crow represents the sun itself, and in Japan, the solar crow is known as Yategarasu. He was sent by the heavens to guide the first emperor of Japan, Jimmu, through the mountains, helping him unite the nation. To this day, the Japan Football Association uses the three-legged crow as their emblem, a divine guide to hopefully lead the ball into a goal. Even the Abrahamic traditions give these birds important roles. While Noah first sent out a raven from the ark, it's in the other stories where they really shine. In the Quran, after Cain kills Abel, he doesn't know what to do with the body, so God sends a raven that digs a grave for another dead bird, teaching humanity how to perform funeral rites. And in the Bible, when the prophet Elijah is hiding in the wilderness, it's ravens who are commanded by God to bring him bread and meat every day, saving his life. In each case, the bird is an instrument of divine teaching or providence. From trickster to teacher, god to guide, fool to phantom, the raven and the crow have occupied nearly every mythological role imaginable. They reflect the dualities we see in the world and in ourselves: creation and destruction, wisdom and foolishness, light and darkness. They are creatures of the threshold, existing between the earth and the sky, between the living and the dead, reminding us that the world is far more intelligent, mysterious, and complex than it first appears. These are the kinds of interconnected stories that we explore in my community, the Fantasy All Access Library. It's a group on a platform called School, and it's more than just books. It gives you access to all of my novels in ebook and audiobook format, with a new book released every month, plus weekly live calls with me where we break down myths, talk writing, and discuss the books. It's the best way to support the channel and dive deeper into this stuff with a community of fellow mythology nerds. The link is in the description if you want to check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.